Members of the public are advised the meeting will be streamed live, recorded, and an audio recording of the meeting will be made publicly available on Council's website. Nillumbik Shire Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting tonight, and we would also like to pay our respects to the elders both past and present and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians present. I will now read the prayer in the absence of a minister. Almighty God, we ask your blessing upon this council. We pray for guidance in our deliberations, and we ask you to grant us wisdom and sensitivity as we deal with the business of our shire to achieve the best outcome for the people of Nillumbik. As we are here for our community, we ask that all are kept safe and united to help each other, particularly the vulnerable and elderly in this time of stress and uncertainty. Amen. We have no apologies and no presentations. Could I please have a mover of the confirmations of minutes of the OCM held on the Tuesday the 24th of March 2020? Councillor Perkins. And can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Jameri. All those in favour? And that is carried. Any disclosures of conflicts of interest, Councillor? If not, we'll move straight on to questions, and we have two questions from Kay Hawkins. I trust that she's watching. Question number 1, has there been any consideration given to adopting a 6-bin waste system like they do overseas? In March this year, the state government announced a 4-bin system for waste and recycling to be rolled out across all councils by 2030, commencing in 2022. For Nillumbik, that would mean 1 extra bin for glass, and this will help improve the viability of recycling by reducing contamination of recyclable products with broken glass. Question 2, would reducing the schedule of rubbish collections help people realise they need to reduce their waste and therefore save the Shire money? Council's current curbside waste bin configuration is designed to maximise diversion of waste from landfill, which reduce waste and cost. It is considered to be best practice based on analysis undertaken by Sustainability Victoria in 2017, published as Optimising Curbside Collection Systems. Nillumbik's curbside collection service consistently achieves greater than 65% diversion from landfill, which is significantly better than the Victorian average of about 44%. And they are the only questions. We now move, there is an advisory committee report, number 00420. Could I have a mover for that? Councillor Brooker?
I could move the advisory committee as on the screen.
And could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ashton.
Thank you.
To speak?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor. I remember talking this particular function up before it occurred, the Healthy and Active Ageing Expo. It's now happened, so I think it's probably appropriate to give something of a review about it. On the day, there were a variety of activities. It was one of those events that was done between Nillumbik and Banyule. It's the first community event I've been to that combined community singing, dancing and cooking in one event, so it was quite a really groundbreaking kind of afternoon. I think the only really unanswered question from the day was certainly if it would become an annual event or a biannual event, and that's still, I think, to be worked through. But certainly the volunteer networks that we surveyed the response all thought it was a very beneficial event for them. Number of volunteers as well on the day that did a great job. So thanks to Fiona and Rebecca from Community Services from Nillumbik, who were integral to the whole day, and thanks to all the community groups from Nillumbik who participated. Thank you.
Yes, I must second those comments. I was there at the same event and it was actually fantastic. Any other councillors wish to comment? If not, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. We now move on to the first of our officers' reports, 05420, the Council Plan Quarterly Performance Report. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Rankin. As per the papers? As per the papers. And can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Clark. Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's privy to note that this is the end of the third quarter. A lot of the items are on track. There's a number of items that have been completed, and there's the one item that has currently been postponed, which, as a matter of fact, comes up later for discussion this evening in regards to the Hurstbridge, the rail extension. But otherwise, I think the organisation is doing a great job, and the team's really pushing through with our council plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Clark. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Brooker.
Thank you. I just wanted to quickly talk about item 25, climate change action. We've experienced, it's incredible in just a few short weeks, it seems, how the issue of climate and the issue of climate change and declaring a climate emergency, in fact, that was such a massive kind of issue over the summer has now been put into second place. It's an extraordinary state of affairs that we have. Nonetheless, I think it's worth saying that we have this genuine emergency now, this pandemic that's been declared by WHO, but we also nonetheless have climate change that we have to deal with as a council, and the number of issues that are under number 25, talking about solar projects, talking about a solar farm in Plenty, talking about solar for the Diamond Valley Sports and Fitness Centre. They are all very real, tangible, practical things that the council is doing. And I think it is very significant that the council is progressing on climate. It is making decisions about this issue. It is not just talking about platitudes, about declaring emergencies with no action. What it is doing is, in fact, delivering lower emissions. And that is what we ought to be doing, lowering emissions. And so it's in the council, it's being reported as in the third quarter. I think it's just, in this context, it's worth talking about. That was all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brooker. Well said. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. We next move on to 05520, the Financial Hardship Policy COVID-19 Pandemic Event. Can I have a mover for
Happy to move
this?
that, Mayor.
Councillor Rankin, as per the papers?
As per the papers.
And a seconder, please. Councillor Clark.
Well, I just wanted to... Firstly, I've got our friends who are watching us from afar texting me, telling me that they can't hear me. So I'm assuming I am connected. Pardon? It is only me, that's right.
Have we got staff looking at that
Maybe there are some
issue?
barracking that's a good idea and others are saying it's not, I'm not sure.
I'd just like to let everybody know that staff are working on that problem at the moment. Do you want to swap mics?
Come over here.
No, you can't. We've got social distancing. We'll just replace some mics. One moment. Thank you. So getting back to we have a mover and a seconder. We'll go back to you, Councillor Rankin, as the mover.
I was told now it was working, but anyway.
As the mover.
Okay.
Hang on, I think
Excuse me, Councillor Clark, it's in Councillor Rankin's hands at the moment.
Does Councillor Clark second the motion?
Yes.
I was happy to second it, just with the addition
Right.
that we also include a dot point on financial hardship relating to commercial premises
Under definitions.
under definitions.
So I'm happy to allow that. Yep,
So those words there, that will be, I'm happy to second that.
perfect.
All right. Over to
Thank
you, Councillor
Happy-
Rankin.
Happy to move that. I think the financial hardship policy, it's a good temporarily revised policy that seeks to balance the equity and the equality across the ratepayers within the Shire. The policy's been circulated to the independent audit committee members as well for their review and their commentary, which has also been included. Considerations during the COVID pandemic event is it allows for the relaxation of provisions within the policy to expedite the granting of rates and charges deferral or interest-free periods. Financial counselling requirements prior to the acceptance of financial hardship application have been temporarily suspended. An initial interest-free period to the 30th of September, and payment arrangements will not be mandatory to receive the interest-free period for the property owner's primary residence. Owners of investment holiday property will be able to apply for hardship considerations during this event, provided they enter into a payment arrangement through council. So I think it's a really good solution, and I'll look for support on this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Any other councillors that wish to speak? Councillor Clark? Any other Councillor Brooker?
Thank you. Look, I think this is obviously a particularly important policy to get up at this time, at this council meeting. Every resident, pays rates directly or indirectly in Nillumbik, some through their tenancy arrangements. Part of the policy states that council will not waive rates, and it also goes on to say it is considered inequitable for the majority of ratepayers to subsidise the property assets of hardship applicants, and further, a more equitable solution for the community is to defer payment. I emphasise that is to defer payment. That is what council seeks to do, and through this policy it has committed to waive interest until September the 30th on the grounds of hardship as defined. It's waived the requirement for financial counselling up until March 2021, and some conditions around those measures. I think it is a fair interim policy. I note that it will be reviewed quarterly, so we can revisit it, and hardship can be redefined or other measures put in place. But the principles outlined, I think, are sound and solid. I also say, in terms of the best type of financial support we can provide ratepayers is through the rate system. The budget is out for it's finished actually. It was out for consultation for a month. That is where people could have their contribution about what the rates can be. But I think what the council can do, amongst a whole lot of things, and it can do and has been doing a lot of non-financial things, but on the financial part of how it can support the community is having a look at how much we're going to charge people in rates. And so when that comes back to us, I think that's what we'll be looking at that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooker. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour, and that is carried. We next move on to 05620, the MEMP, Municipal Emergency Management Plan. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Perkins.
Thanks, Mayor Egan. I'll move the council adopts the Nillumbik Municipal Emergency Management Plan 2020 to 23 as in attachment 1.
And can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ashton. Councillor Perkins.
Look, just one slight typo that perhaps I'd like office to address, and it's just a small one. It's on page 52 of the report, and talking about the Municipal Emergency Management Planning Committee. Membership of the committee, and the committee consists of emergency management lead, Executive Officer, the Municipal Emergency Resource Officer, the Municipal Fire Prevention Officer, the Municipal Recovery Manager, Public Information Officer. There's no mention of the Chair, which I am. So if we could include the Chair of the committee, I'm a member of that committee and I'd like to stay. So if we could just put me back on the committee, I'm the Chair of the committee. Last time I checked. That small amendment will keep me in a job for another few months, perhaps. I'm not sure. Does that require anything in the motion? No, we can sort that out. So the Nillumbik Municipal Emergency Management Plan, or the plan, it's a legislated document intended by use for all persons and organisations with emergency management roles in Nillumbik, and it is available to the general public. The document aims to contribute to the development of a more disaster-resilient community in Nillumbik, and one that's better able to prepare for, respond and recover from emergency events. It's consistent with the state and regional emergency management objectives. Nillumbik Shire Council works together with emergency services, agencies, all levels of government, local industries and businesses, communities and neighbouring local government areas to prevent and minimise the occurrence and impact of emergency events to people, businesses and the environment. So the plan's been developed by members of the Nillumbik Municipal Emergency Management Planning Committee, and just for your interest, as well as some council officers and a councillor. We've got a representative from Victoria Police, and that's the Senior Sergeant at Eltham. He's also the Municipal Emergency Response Coordinator. We've got representatives from the Country Fire Authority, Department of Health and Human Services, Ambulance Victoria, Parks Victoria, St John Ambulance, Victorian Council of Churches Emergency Ministry, Victoria State Emergency Service. We've also got some community representatives. Plenty Valley FM is also represented. I know Red Cross is as well. Look, it builds on previous plans. It's been put across and endorsed by the Municipal Emergency Management Planning Committee. So look, I think it's appropriate it's appropriate that Council endorse the plan. It's gone in front of the experts. They're comfortable with the plan. They've made the required changes to it, short of keeping me on the committee, which we'll do. I endorse the plan and seek council support.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Our next report is 05720. The submission for integrating environment protection reform into land use planning. Can I have a mover for the motion, please? Councillor Clark.
I move that Council endorse and submits the submission as attachment 1 to the proposed reforms integrating environment protection into land use planning to DWELP by the submission deadline of the 5th of May.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Brooker. Councillor Clark.
Mayor, broadly, the Council is supportive of this particular change and a better integration with environment matters within the planning scheme, trying to make it clearer, but we have got some minor suggestions as to how we might clarify a few points within our planning scheme and related to Nillumbik, but they're not dramatic, but we commend the work and we'll forward the submission to the department. Look forward to it getting finally implemented.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Brooker.
Thank you. Look, I reference in attachment 1 to the document what we're going to be sending off. Yarrambat and Plenty are specifically identified there as parts of the Shire where this contamination could exist. I mean, there are other parts of the Shire where gold mining occurred, and it just as easily, I think, could have been referenced. I've seen firsthand, actually, in my ward on a property that was subject to the acquisition process of Yanyun Road and a disused gold shaft in a property in Yarrambat. So certainly these gold mine shafts and stuff certainly exist in that area. But this is a really kind of tricky area of planning, of talking about environmental audit overlays. But I support, it's trying to distinguish between an assessment process and an audit process. And the assessment process is trying to figure out if the site is potentially contaminated, if then it needs further assessment, and then if you need an environmental audit. And I would say that just because an audit is required doesn't necessarily mean the site is contaminated. It does mean that you have to establish a process to establish whether that is the case or not. So an environmental audit isn't necessarily saying anything. It just means you need to do the work. But I would say the prudent step for property owners is, when you're looking at developing, property, is to budget for an audit. It seems to me it could be the case that an environmental audit is required. You need to budget that in your development proposal for whatever land you happen to own. It seems to me that would be a prudent thing, because this is going to be something that I'm sure is going to be incorporated into this Environmental Protection Act. So there are uncertainties around it. I think prudency would mean that you should at least allocate some funding towards that process. It means it's going to be more expensive. If you have to do an audit, that's going to cost money. But the important thing is that you're aware of it from the beginning. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooker. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Clark? No, you have spoken. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And again, that is carried. Thank you. We now move on to 05820, the update on the State Government's Hurstbridge Railway Duplication Project, Stage 2. Can I have a mover, please?
I'm happy to move that with the addition. And item 3, that Council seeks a meeting with the member for Yan Yean and member for Eltham to discuss the Council's position relating to the upgrade of the State Government's Hurstbridge Railway Duplication Project, Stage 2.
Can I have a seconder, please, for the motion? Councillor Brooker. Councillor Clark?
Mayor, you might ordinarily think that a duplication of a railway line is anything but good news. In fact, most of this report is setting out the problems that this is likely to provide this municipality. This is a good news story if you live in Banyule. If you live in Nillumbik, you will find there are level crossings which will be down longer for the 2 trains that we're going to see at the peak hours between 7 and 9 a.m. in the morning in 3 distinct locations. There will be issues about crossing the railway line at the Diamond Creek end, where we need an underpass. There are a whole raft of issues which are still not resolved at the Nillumbik end, and thus far, the irony being that this train line is going to be built by the Level Crossing Authority, is ignoring the letters and the requests for further information that the Council's previously sent. And so this seeks after a lot of good work by officers involved in those meetings where they are setting out the concerns of the Shire and the impact. We're just not getting the response and the requirements that we need to be certain that our community is actually going to have a net benefit. What we do know at the moment is we're likely to get 2 more services in the peak hour. That's basically the extent of this for the otherwise grief that it's going to create. We also know now that the work is going to continue further towards the Trestle Bridge in Eltham, at least up to Silver Street, although it would appear at this point most of those works are to do with signalling, vegetation and other matters, and they're not looking to duplicate at this stage the various overpasses and other things that would have otherwise needed to occur. So the exercise is to send the letters off again to the relevant ministers and to the authority. And I think what we're trying to do is to highlight to the local members who, to be frank, I think have recognised the issues of concern and are arguing for not dissimilar outcomes that we're looking for. But for whatever reason, the bureaucracy is not providing the same level of advice or support that one might otherwise see. And it would seem that certainly the focus on budget is paramount, and what they can pull out to be able to meet their own timeframes and budgets is the issue. At the moment, on balance, it's probably, you'd have to say it's more likely that the community will be worse off than better off in Nillumbik as a result of these works. There is no new railway station upgrades. In fact, if you look at from the Diamond Creek end, which you'd have to have reasonable concern at, they're now looking to use effectively the disused, very narrow, I think it's platform 1, Councillor Perkins? Is it 2? The platform that's not used a lot, very narrow, will become the main focus of this at peak hour without any other extensions which we've highlighted that you'd want to see. So there's a raft of issues where we need to sit down with local members and say, what can we do to help you? Because I think they will be arguing to try and solve some of these problems in an effort to fix this at the moment. It's certainly not providing all of the advantages at this point that was proposed at the time of the last election. So I don't think we want to scaremonger on this. We simply want to try and work with the local members to get it right. And that's what we're setting out to do here, and get to talk more directly to the ministers rather than to the bureaucracy who doesn't seem to be listening to the good work that our own officers are taking forward and considering. I do note with interest that, again, the Shire's been taken out of the planning process, not unique to the Shire. It's happening to all of those councils along the way. Government's used its processes again just to run roughshod over the whole planning process. Again, just happened overnight. So it's the nature of how they're dealing with this. Seems to be all about time frame, but it's not delivering the benefits at this stage. I commend the resolution, and hopefully working in conjunction with our local members will get a better outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Perkins.
Thanks, Mayor. Again, look, so Council has been trying on this one and trying hard. There are some significant concerns in Diamond Creek. I think there probably will be a net benefit, but there certainly are some issues that need to be addressed. So I think officers have been working hard on this. They've provided a very good detailed submission that's been sent to the Minister. We haven't heard back. That was the 21st of January. It'd be good to get something back from the government. Really, the only letter that we have got is from the Level Crossing Removal Authority that basically disregards our submission, doesn't talk to it at all. You know, the issues that we're putting up are real. It will have a significant impact in terms of how things are going to play out. You know, we need some insurance, as the community will need some insurance as this thing's built. That we are going to end up with a net benefit and making this project as good as it can possibly be. You know, we're not necessarily asking for more budget, but you know, just to understand our concerns, to give us some assurance that you know, future budgets the government will be seeking to allocate some money towards this. You know, seeing it as the community priority project that it is. So it's just. Yeah, it's unfortunate that we haven't heard anything back from the Minister from late January. We do understand that you know, very, very difficult time for everybody with the pandemic going on. But you know, presumably this project is gonna roll on, and you know, I'm sure that the community more broadly and council want some confidence that the concerns have been heard, you know, potentially been addressed, and there can be some understanding of you know, how we're going to solve some of these issues that are being put forward. And you know, if they're not issues, come and please tell us. So yeah, certainly just like to thank officers for the good work that they've been doing in pulling together the submission. You know, some very good detailed photos that articulates very well some of the safety concerns. You know, there's letters going back some years from Diamond Valley College and Diamond Creek East, particularly concerning the safety of school kids crossing the single railway line at the moment with no pedestrian crossing, just going across the single track. The fact there's going to be another track, you know, another train, it's quite concerning. So just endorse the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Brooker. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Look, I do think, I agree with both councillors. I think we do need to say this is a wonderful project that would be even better if some of the submissions of the council was adopted. So that is what we are seeking to do. And I think, look, I do think the elephant in the room in some respects is we do really need the support of the two local MPs. I think we have it probably privately, or we'd like it publicly, but I think they're probably concerned that the council, for whatever reasons, would be trying to politicise the project to their detriment. I think that is actually what they would be concerned about. But, you know, from my point of view, I can most certainly say that it would be absolutely the last thing I would be looking to do. And what we are trying to do is to get some of these things, we talk about a low-cost addition being a bike path from Greensboro to Eltham that we know some of our residents have been helpful in laying that kind of route out. We want to do some things that are going to make it better, and without trying to say it's someone's fault if they don't happen. So I think it's really kind of a delicate kind of balance that we need to find. I think we can find it, and so, you know, we'll certainly try. We'll certainly try our very, very best to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Booker. Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Councillor Booker, and it's nice that people are feeling really positive about this. But I do think, you know, if you're a commuter in Hurstbridge, the story here is that most people from Hurstbridge that are working in the city already drive to Greensboro or Eltham because they want more regular times, and they don't want to sit on a train for an hour and have to wait for an hour between trains to get back home. So people are already driving to Greensboro and Eltham, and the promise of an additional 2 or 3 trains during peak time isn't going to get those people to not do that. Not only are you going to get that, you compared with the major congestion we're now going to get on the St Andrews and Diamond Creek Road for, you know, I don't know how long that will be, but you know, Hurstbridge is the end of a line. We already spend a lot of time in the summer on buses. We're often the people that get really penalised when there is other level crossing works going on. So for rural people and rural people trying to get into the city, this isn't really a good news story. I think it was meant to be, but I don't think it's been thought through properly. And again, thank you for officers and for other councillors for trying to get better outcomes for people in Nillumbik, but unfortunately I don't think we're going to get them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashton. Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of comments that I have from the Swipers Gully ward particularly. It's great that we're going to get these extra couple of trains coming through during peak hour, but the level crossing removal project failed to look, or Vic Roads back then failed to actually look at the bridge there at Wattletree Road and at Main Road. And it would have been a smart idea going back 8 or 10 years ago when it was first put in or redone, that they should have built the bridge high enough back then to go over the train line. We get stuck there every morning and every night with the current trains. The traffic banks back over the Main Road, Wattletree Road intersection. That's horrendous there, and particularly, not right now because of COVID, but particularly during school time, before school, after school pickups, peak hour, it's just horrendous. And I call on the local members to be able to have a closer look with the level crossing removal project team and come up with a better solution for that intersection. How can we do it better? It's great that it's looking for Diamond Creek, and there's a number of other concerns there from that Councillor Perkins has raised, but I really think that the government has to have a closer look at the Wattletree Road and Main Road intersection. From a Swipers Gully point of view, it's horrendous trying to get through there at peak hour. Thank you.
It's not only that, Councillor Rankin, it also means that the Diamond Creek crossing will be down twice as long, so the traffic there is going to be even worse. So we still need to vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. We now move on to report 060, the March quarter financial report. Can I have a mover, please?
Happy to move that, Mayor, as per the recommendations.
Councillor Rankin. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Clark.
There we go, we've got it up now.
Councillor Rankin.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's fair to note, and talking to the officers, that our cash balances remain strong. Council is able to meet its interim short-term commitments. The capital works program is progressing, and from a year-to-date perspective is certainly within budget. Given the unprecedented and current environments and the impacts of COVID, The income and the expenditure will be closely reviewed and monitored for the remainder of the financial year, as it is anyway. Income is tracking slightly ahead of budget, which is largely attributed to the grants received of $1.1 million year to date, where the expenses overall is slightly over budget and continually is monitored within the main drivers being external contracts, materials and related costs, and these are also offset by an underspend in employee benefits. Employee benefits, which means a delay in recruitment and vacant positions across the organisation. So overall, the officers and the team are doing a fantastic job in keeping a very close eye on the budget from almost a week-to-week basis at the moment. Well done to the officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Clark.
Mayor, I support the commentary of Councillor Rankin, but I just wanted to highlight one ongoing issue which remains for local governments around Victoria, and that is the appalling performance of Fines Victoria. This has a negative impact on our budget of about $120,000 in this quarter. Their inability to be able to do their job is having a negative impact on all local governments. And, as has been indicated by Councillor Rankin, the staff are doing a good job to monitor the cash flow, and the budget is still quite strong. But, the government really has got to fix Fines Victoria. It's gone on for far too long. All other local governments are making the same sorts of complaints, and I just wanted to highlight that as an ongoing issue. And I think, our audit committee and others, this hasn't been resolved by the end of the financial year, one that we need to write as part of our notes at the end of the financial year, that these sort of cash flow issues cannot continue out of that organisation.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Any other councillors wish to speak? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. We next have item 61, Assembly of Councillors. Can I have a mover? Move as per the papers. Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Brooker. All those in favour? And that is carried. I'd like to move the next four items, 62, 63, 64 and 65 in a block. They all relate to financial and confidential tenders.
I'm happy to move them, those four items.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
As per their recommendations, and councillors can speak individually to
And
them
a
as they wish.
seconder, Councillor Rankin. Councillor Clark.
Look, I think each of these matters will get picked up, but basically we're looking to include and extend a facility for the Diamond Valley Sports and Fitness Centre on the premise of we want to extend the architectural services so that we can have a more fulsome look at the building code requirements given the nature of the work we're doing there on the balance of the building. On the construction of the 3 trail bridges, we had let that contract, as indicated earlier on tonight. That contractor subsequently has indicated they're not going to meet our program, so we're going to seek to let a contract to an alternate supplier that we'd already been in conversation with. None of those will have dramatic impact on budgets. And then we've got extensions of design and construction for the Diamond Creek Regional Play Space. Councillor Perkins might want to talk about that further, but in essence, whilst there's been some level of community engagement, it's been more difficult with COVID-19 to do what we would otherwise want to do, but certainly the officers have diligently gone through the current contract, looked at ways in which we can improve it better, still stay within the overall budget limit of $2.5 million, but get a whole series of better outcomes with more accessible play equipment, better grassed areas, additional landscaping. And then finally, we'll be dealing with the Chief Executive's employment matters later on under the executive matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Brooker, do you wish to speak?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor. Look, on the redevelopment of the Diamond Valley Sports and Fitness Centre, another opportunity to speak on this project. You bet I'm going to take it. Look, this report is to increase the amount, as Councillor Clark said, on the project architects Henderson Lodge, to ensure the building is fit for purpose and compliant with building legislation. Look, that is the bad news. Look, the good news is the new building will be DDA compliant, is the phrase, and that's Disability Discrimination Act compliant. So for the long-term integrity of the building, and I think for the long-term really integrity of the council, that is really certainly a desirable outcome. I want to let the public know that the preparatory work that can be done is being done at the moment. There's been some vegetation removal, no permit required around the house at the southern end of the facility. That property has been the subject of some vandalism over the last few days. But in the next few weeks, I believe the intention is for that building to be removed. And at this stage, the contract awarded at the July OCM. So look forward to that. So that means once that contract is awarded, there should be no delay in making some meaningful progress on that project. And look, just on the subject of meaningful progress, I would like to point out what has been done does include the installation of a lift. That does mean that for the first time since the building was built in 1976, that someone who walks in the front door into the reception can get down to the basketball courts. That is, been the first step of getting that building into a state where it is disability compliant. At least that first step has been made. There are many, many others that need to be done. But it's been overdue, but it has now actually happened, and I think that is a good thing. So years of apology, of inadequacy, of the most basic kind of access issues has been solved. That is good. There is more to come in this area. Thank you.
We will look forward to the next instalment, Councillor Brooker. Any other councillors wish to speak on any of those 4 items? If not, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour, and that is carried. We now have a procedural motion. Councillor Brooker.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move a motion to move the order of business, and it's adjusted as follows. To hear item 13, notices of motion prior to item 12. Is that right?
Seconder, Councillor Perkins. We don't really need to talk about this, it's just a matter of voting on it. All those in favour? And that is carried. We'll now move into that notices of motion, which is the notice of rescission, 00420. And the motion is that Council, this is from Councillor Peter Perkins and Councillor John Demerick, that Council rescind the Council resolution made on 24 March 2020 that refers to item OCM 053. Councillor Brooker, can you turn your mic off, please? That refers to item OCM 05320, review of instrument of delegation to the Chief Executive Officer. So do you wish to speak to that, Councillor Perkins?
Yeah, just very briefly, I'll move that motion. Look, in the height of the crisis with the pandemic when it started, there was some rushed work done to make some amendments to the instrument of delegation for the Chief Executive Officer. It was brought about by recommendation from Local Government Victoria. It just didn't, at the time, follow our usual process. I understand why it happened the way it happened, because there was a real urgency around it. I put a rescission motion up, hoping that we might be able to improve some of that decision, and we've had a subsequent briefing, and I think there's general consensus that we could have made that decision a bit better, and that's what the notice of rescission sought to do, is just freeze that decision until tonight. So I'm hoping that notice of rescission it gets supported, so we can move on to the next report, which is a result of further briefings that we've had and wider discussion amongst council, and it's fair to say that some of the urgency has lapsed, given that we can now continue to have council meetings, even if it is remotely. Yep. So.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Clark.
I concur with the principle of what Councillor Perkins has said. Whilst this rescission motion is there, but suffice to say that the next resolution we'll be going to move is to a new instrument of delegation, which is in essence the same one that we moved a month ago. The only real difference is that it's got a defined date of review. It's the same amount of money. It's still proposing a delegation moving to 500,000. The only other point I'd make is this was only ever going to get used in exceptional circumstances, and there's no doubt after the state of emergency is finally removed, hopefully, we will go back to, I guess, more ordinary circumstances. But at the time, the view was, given that we needed to meet physically, if for whatever reason, and what was a worst outcome then, that some of the councillors actually contracted COVID-19, we couldn't get a quorum, and there were indeed emergency matters that the Shire had to deal with, whether in concert with the state or federal government. The level of authority that the CEO had may necessarily not have been capable of achieving that. And so the intention at that time was to ensure that the community was protected. And that's why we moved it at that particular point. But the tidy up that we'll do in a minute will deal with the procedural matters, but I think we need to understand why we did it in the first instance. I had no problem with what we did in the first instance, but procedurally, so that we can move on to the second matter, we need to deal with this matter. So I'll deal with it on the premise of its procedural process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. If no other councillors wish to speak, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour of the notice of rescission? And that is carried. All those against? That is carried. I think we got confused there. Sorry? Yeah. We'll do that one again. All those in favour of upholding the notice of rescission? I'm still confused. All those against? And that is carried. We will now move on to the 06620 review of instrument of delegation to the Chief Executive Officer. Councillor, do I have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Rankin.
Happy to move that as per the recommendation with Part 3, amended clause of 2.5 of the instrument of delegation to read as follows: remains in force until Council resolves to vary or until the first meeting of Council is held following the lifting of the state of emergency declared by the Victorian Government for COVID-19.
Thank you. And can I have a second, please? Councillor Ashton. Councillor Rankin, do you wish to speak to that?
No, I think we've spent enough time going through this, particularly the last meeting. So I'm happy that the rescission's gone through, and that hopefully this recommendation will get up and shortly that the government may declare the state of emergency as a non-existent soon.
Thank you, Councillor Rankin. Any other councillors wish to speak?
Just a
Councillor
query.
Perkins.
My understanding was that we were going to amend 2.5 to say the words that were in the briefing paper, which is the instrument remains in force until the first meeting of Council is held following the lifting of the state of emergency declared by the Victorian Government for COVID-19. It says or until.
So resolves to vary before that.
Whichever comes first.
Oh, all right. I thought we were inserting these words.
And it's already written into the draft. Is that correct? Yeah.
The advantage of this is that you could actually revoke it earlier if you wanted to, rather than waiting for the state of emergency.
Okay, it's just not what we talked about in the pre-meet.
No, I think they've just tidied up the words in the meantime.
Well, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Perkins. All those in favour? Sorry, Councillor Clark.
I just wanted to highlight exactly that this whole debate has really been about item 3, which simply just says that's what it's been. We've spent an awful lot of time on, frankly, not much. But the importance was that we're able to have and look after the community by way of some amendments to the delegation, and that's what this does. And I hope we will be at least now in a unanimous position with respect to that matter.
Correct. All those in favour? Sorry, Councillor Brooker.
Look, the reason I would like to say is I'm supporting the motion tonight is that there is that time limit that has been specified, which was the one big problem with the original motion back in March. So having clause 3 there is the trigger to get rid of it. So that's very important, that there is a prescribed trigger for it to be removed. There was no trigger in the previous motion. Now,
all right.
I would also say, this is now strictly kind of moot, is what Councillor Clark has alluded to. The facts are the Victorian government has changed the Local Government Act to enable meetings to be held remotely. Correct. So there could not ever be, I think, a possibility where a quorum couldn't be achieved for reasons that no councillor could raise a hand for a vote from their home, from their deathbed.
Can I suggest if 7
From their
councillors had
deathbed.
COVID-19, that's a good reason.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, I think the fact is you would need 4 councillors on ventilators for this not to occur. So
Don't wish that upon us, please.
So I think that it is now moot now that the government has changed the law. Well, that's right, what the government has done. They have changed the law. I think it's moot. I'll support it. There's a trigger there. We won't ever need to use it.
Does any other councillor wish to speak on this matter before I put it to the vote? Thank you. All those in favour? And that is finally carried. Thank you. We have no delegate reports, but we do have, or supplementary and urgent business, but we do have some confidential reports. Could I have somebody move to go into confidential? Councillor Ashton, seconded Councillor Clark. All those in favour? And that is carried. So farewell from the council here gallery. I hope you're all staying safe at home and well. And we miss all of your lovely faces in the gallery. Thank you. Good night.